All right, so next step. I tossed an old dead battery in here just to kind of show kind of some position, right? So old battery, negative, positive, negative goes to ground, positive goes to power, right? And this bike came with a battery cable whip that was grounded actually to here, which is kind of sketchy because there's still primer and paint. It wasn't really a good contact, so I have suspicion that the ground wasn't good anyway. And power over here. So I set this up so I could start evaluating basically what do I want to keep and what do I want to get rid of? Is there anything I want to keep? So before I just go yanking wires out, which is totally an option, right? If you want, you can just go nuts. And if it looks like a wire, just rip it off the bike. Snip, 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 and rip it off. However, I kind of like to know what was here and what was not. Because here's the big thing. While I will probably be replacing almost everything electrical, the biggest piece that I am keeping is the ignition. So I want to make sure wiring that. And I know I can look up Dynatech and look at their wiring diagram, which I also have. Cover that later. I want to see how things were put together in this bike. So I kind of started up at the front. I got rid of that horrible mess. So now I just have the two wires from the headlight, snip those. And basically if I come around this side of the bike, this was wire going up to the headlight. I know that, and I'm going to replace the headlight. I'm actually doing dual headlights on a Springer, so that's of no consequence to me. This little distribution pack, though, I'm kind of curious about because I want to know what it is and what it isn't. And what I can tell is that coming from the top, there are 4 wires. 4 wires. It looks like, there you can see, there's a white wire that's fat, a black wire that's fat, and 2 skinnier, probably like 2 12 gaugers and then a couple of 16 gauge wires. So white, black, and then black and black. And if I follow that pack down, one of those little guys pops out, and this went down to the coil. So I know that was the coil. I follow these guys back, white and 2 black dive into the frame. And at the back here, white, black, and black. I can tell that these come out of that frame hole there. So I see that these 3 go up to that distribution box. And then it looks like one wire comes back from it to go down to the coil. So I'm suspecting that one of those wires is hot coming up to energize all that. And then it's hot power coming back to other devices. So if I look here, of these 3, one of them is, right, because you can kind of see it. See it there, it's this guy, which is this guy, which is actually part of this pack, and this pack went to the rear brake light. So one of those thin black wires coming up through the backbone tube here goes to the brake light. One of the wires from the brake light was ground, which makes sense. Green for ground. And I can look in the end of it there. I can see a green wire. So I had ground. I had one wire that goes probably from a hot connection up. That's for the normal running light. And then my guess is this last wire here probably goes down the tube. Yeah, that goes down the tube and probably to the rear brake switch, which on this bike is tucked right in there. Don't know if I can point to it, but you see the cylinder piece in there? That is a hydraulic brake light switch. So when the juice comes through here and pressurizes, it pushes on that and causes the circuit to close. And that's what makes the rear brake light up. Now, I do know from when I bought the bike, when I stepped on the rear brake light didn't light up. So that could be a number of problems, right? So either the switch down there is bad, or this hot wire for brake that goes down through the tube is pinched or frayed somewhere and grounding out, or the actual brake light itself on the rear fender, the filament for the brake might be bad in there. So, you know, when you see just a brake light that doesn't work, like, you got to understand there's a whole bunch of different reasons that might be. So here's my thing and the way I operate. I know that I'm going to be doing a different brake light as well, and wiring kind of up all the way to the top of a sissy bar and down to two different brakes, rear brakes. So for me, I know that's dead, and I know that I no longer need this whip. It is garbage. There was nothing else grounded to the battery. Now, there might be other things grounded to the frame, but if this ground from the battery to frame was sketchy, then anything else that's grounded to the frame might be sketchy to ground itself back out to the battery. It all has to connect, which might even be why the engine wasn't running super clean and spark was kind of iffy, because even the spark system has to rely on ground coming back through frame, back into battery, and the whole system energized and balanced together. So when I see stuff like this, where this was literally just bolted through one of these 3 optional speed holes, I guess. Holes that are drilled straight through the frames. That's kind of cool. This was basically just bolted right here with a 3-bolt. I have a lot of questions about whether or not that was getting a good solid ground. So that's obviously something we'll take a look at. But going back to this, so I got these other wires, and it looks like that one black wire that was going up to the front was the other thin black wire. I can see here, if I dig out, I should then be able to pull through that. And I know that this wire was the rear brake, and that's one of the thin ones. So when I get up here, I know there's 2 thin ones. I don't know which one in this wrap goes to the coil and which one goes to the rear brake. So I'll probably take a razor blade and split this open, just so I can tell. The fact is, I'm going to redo wiring to the coil for dual coil, and there's a special wiring set up from Dynatech to wire up the 2 coils. So it really doesn't matter all that much, other than to say, okay, the two thin wires are not my hot coming in. My hot coming into this box is either the fat black or the fat white wire, and that brings me back here. So I got these 2, and these 2 is where it gets kind of interesting with power, right? Because this is the power chunk. This whole thing was bolted to power in. Got a really fat wire that goes down the hole. I got a red wire that goes over to the key, and I got a green wire that goes down the hole. So the red goes battery from battery over and energizes this whole contraption. Now, I took off the 2 9/16 bolts that hold this guy in. Spin this around and see what we got. So the key is on the bottom. The push button start, which again no longer works because this bike has kick only. Had a former wire that's missing, but then a black wire that's still connected. That's one of the black wires that goes up through. So I got red coming from battery that becomes this pack, goes into the key switch, and this is all bundled up. But I know that out of that bundle, the only thing left that's coming out is a white up to this box. So that's extra weird. I didn't expect to find that. I mean, just kind of trying to look and see how things were done. I didn't expect the bigger black wire to be going to a push button for the electric start. And it feels like there's only 2 wires in here. So this key switch is straight up simple. It's basically an on or off at that point. I've run key switches where it's off, on, off, accessory, on, and then the spring-loaded start. That's what I did on the Iron Head on the channel. This bike being kick only, I'll probably do, I don't know, I might just do an on-off, or I might do an off, accessory, on, and then for the kick, we'll see. I'll just do an on-off. I might actually reuse this switch. We'll see. But basically, your red power brings power hot always into the switch. Switch goes on, it feeds this white wire juice. White wire comes up, energizes this pack, and then this pack sends, it's just a splitter really, sends power back out to the coil, power to the headlight, power to everywhere. So what I can tell now is that this pack up at the top, I don't need. There's nothing here that I'm going to reuse. There's nothing here that I need to save or preserve. Even the wire to the coil, I'm going to run new. Now, this other wire, the blue and white coming from the ignition, that I'm going to keep. And I know that much because I'm not changing the ignition. And I don't want to mess with these blue and white wires. Now I may make them shorter. I'll probably take off this cloth wrap and shrink tube this and reroute it so that it's cleaner. I'll have to play with that. My instinct is to route stuff from the ignition onto the bike, up through the seat post up here, and then down to the coil. That's a lot cleaner, rather than possibly getting tangled up in the primary. But for now, I'll keep this until I'm sure of the routing. But this stuff up here, I really don't need. I'm rewiring the headlight. I'm rewiring the brake. This wiring that goes into this former housing, I don't need. There's nothing else on these circuits that concern me. So the only other thing I'm going to do is run through and verify what these wires are. Now these are the ones, there's like a fatter wire that goes down in through the seat post, and what looks to be a green wire. So if I look down in, I'm not seeing any holes where those wires come out. So it's a matter of getting under the bike, which the seat post is currently on the jack stand, which is covered in oil because there's no sump overflow tube. It just spits right out the back of the case, which is awesome. So I gotta figure out where these 2 wires go. I'm curious about those, but the rest so far I don't need. So that means I can just remove, right? So going back to that at the beginning, yeah, you can just grip it, rip it, cut, slash, and be fine with that. But I like to know what I'm working with first and kind of see how somebody else put it together, because ultimately it's just going to make me more familiar with what I'm looking at and more prepared in either A, how to match what they did because they did it well, or in this case, do it a little bit differently because I think it can be done a little bit better. So that's the investigation part. I'm going to figure out what those two wires are, establish that, and then basically everything but this wire I'm just going to remove from the bike. I got some parts on the way, some headlights, taillights, new spark plug wires, all that stuff is coming. Once I have that, basically what I'll do is another video to lay all those pieces out and kind of show you, okay, here's what the design is for the stuff that needs power, how I go about designing how I want the wires to connect all those, the drawings that I do, and how I ultimately produce a wiring diagram. If you guys have seen the iron head video that I did for the Midnight Rider iron head, which I obviously no longer have, I got a project shovel head there. If you saw the iron head video, I mentioned the wiring diagram, and a lot of you have reached out to get a copy of that JPEG of the wiring diagram for the iron head. Always happy to do that. If you have any questions, happy to send what I have. As I put together the drawing for this bike, I will do the same. So if you have a shovel head, kick only, with a, let's just say ignition, right? Because what I'll do probably will work pretty much for the Dyna S or points. If you got this type of setup, when I'm done with this, the wiring diagram, it's yours. Just send me an email, bpeak82@gmail.com, and happy to help any way I can. So stay tuned. As soon as I get those parts, we'll set up the next video. Cheers, guys. Take care.